I'm Jill Stokold with Georgia's Media Group, and I'm excited to welcome our panel of experts and our viewing audience today. Let me start by thanking AARP Louisiana for sponsoring this important discussion. We appreciate their partnership delivering critical information about fraud in today's digital world. Now I'd like to introduce our panelist, Dr. Fani Vudrube. He is an assistant professor in the Division of Computer Science and Engineering at LSU and a faculty member at LSU's Center for Computation and Technology. We have Felton Joseph Jr., Secret Service agent in Baton Rouge and member of Southwest Louisiana Fraud Task Force. Bobby Savoy, AARP Regional Volunteer Director and former state president of AARP Louisiana. And last but not least, Captain Richard Decuir, leader in East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office Financial Crimes Division. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we start, we have a brief message from our partner, AARP.
Welcome to the Advocates Virtual Roundtable Discussion. I'm Denise Botcher, AARP State Director.
And I'm Alfred Mason, AARP State President.
AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people to choose how they live as they age.
We work to strengthen communities and advocate for issues impacting older adults and their families.
Here in Louisiana, we know that fraud is a significant concern for older adults. And it's not just a financial loss, it's a betrayal of trust that can have lasting emotional impacts.
And we're here today to shed light on the types of fraud targeting older adults and provide valuable insight on how to stay safe.
That's right. We've seen everything from healthcare scams to counterfeit prescription drugs to fraudulent investment schemes. And unfortunately, the list goes on.
And with today's technology, scammers are finding new ways to deceive people every day. It's why being informed and vigilant is more important than ever.
We encourage everyone to visit AARP's Fraud Watch Network online. It's a great tool for keeping up to date with the latest scams and learning how to safeguard your personal information.
We hope you enjoyed today's discussion.
All right, let's get started. So first, I'd like to open it up with a couple of questions for all of you.
Right.
So what is phishing, and how can seniors distinguish between legitimate communications, say from a financial institution or a government agency, and phishing attempts?
I could start off with the answer. Phishing is a digital scam mechanism that's often used by cyber criminals, and the phishing could happen in emails, it could happen in web pages, but the underlying phenomenon that's common to all phishing mechanisms is that the scammers imitate the look and feel of something that's legitimate and benign. The problem in the digital world is that everything can be copied exactly at a pixel level. There's no way to prevent that. So you can have an alternative web page that is phishing, but it looks exactly like your original web page. No spelling errors, no logo issues, everything will look exactly the same. Same with emails. You could get an exact email like you get from a legitimate one, but this could be a phishing email. The only way to differentiate is looking at what the source is. Like, for example, for a web page, at the top, you can see the spelling of the web page site. And the spelling could be something like google.com with 2 O's in it. You need to pay very close attention to the address because someone could very easily register something Google with 3 O's in it. And that is being controlled by the scammers. Everything else looks the same. So it's very, very important to pay attention to it. Same thing with emails. When you receive an email, it's important to see where the email is coming from because everything else will look exactly like the benign one. And that.
So, Jill, what we tell people that come to our workshops is be skeptical. Don't just assume that it's legitimate. And like you said, when you look at that email address, if you can click on the email address without responding to the email, and you'll see that it's always not who it appears to be from. And so, again, it's It's a shame we have to be skeptical about everything that we do, but in this digital world, it's just very important.
No, those are very good and key points. But one thing we also want to remember with the tool of phishing is just like fishing in the real world. You're just casting out to see who you get. So while some of it may be directed at a target specific person, but usually it's like en masse. So it's sent to multiple entities, either an organization or just an email list, a distro list that the scammer or the criminal has obtained. So they're phishing. They're just trying to get whoever they can on the hook.
Yeah, our rule of thumb with that is to always, if it's from a financial institution, just verify. Call your bank just to make sure that they did send you some type of correspondence. And that would be the easiest way just to verify.
Before opening and or clicking on anything in the email.
100%, just to make sure is what it is.
Sure.
And if it's your bank, they're going to tell you immediately. And then you know, hey, okay, we need to go forward with this. Or just not to.
Right.
And if you don't have certain institutions or you don't communicate with them, just delete. Just go from there. It's not for you. If you don't have a certain credit union, that's obviously not yours. So feel free to delete and move on.
Right. One less thing to look at.
Yes.
It's almost like getting junk mail in the mailbox.
Right.
It's the exact same thing.
It's a great way to great analogy. What resources are available for those who have been victims of cyber fraud, and how can they seek assistance and support?
There are several aspects and places people can go when they're a victim of fraud or some kind of cyber attack on their personal email, their bank account, or things of that nature. FTC can always contact the ftc.gov to file a report with them, identity theft. Contact your local law enforcement. We always encourage. You can contact the U.S. Secret Service to advise us of this, and we take those reports seriously. And we need those reports because usually what we find is if one person is a victim of these phishing attacks, there's multiple victims. And we usually take that information and kind of build our cases and kind of leads us to our suspects. And we can see if it's affecting a geographic area, it's affecting certain customers of a certain website. And so that helps us with our investigations, and it helps us identify where the gaps may be, and we can help prevent this in the future.
Jill, AARP also has a resource, the Fraud Watch Network Helpline. Well, Fraud Watch Network and then the Fraud Watch Network Helpline, the Fraud Watch Network, they can go there to find out what kinds of scams and identity theft might be happening, not only around the country, but in their particular area as well. And then there are volunteers who staff the helpline where, victims can call and talk to them. And if nothing else, commiserate. If you lose money to fraud, there's a very small chance that you're going to recover any of it, most likely not. So the thing about reporting, like he said, is very important. Report it to law enforcement. If it's reported and if you know about it, you're less likely to engage in a fraud scheme or some identity theft scheme.
And one big thing we've found, most people become embarrassed that it happened to them. But everyone must realize that you're not the only one. And by you reporting it, it helps us help someone else not become a victim.
Right.
One of the things we as a Secret Service and as part of our cyber fraud task force, yes, some of the funds may not be recovered, but we do diligent work and we are successful sometimes at recovering some of those funds. And if we don't know that you're a victim, how do we know to get some of those funds back to you? So we're always seeking that information. Yes, it may be embarrassing. It may be a lot. It may be detrimental, but report these things somewhere to some either law enforcement or to one of the agencies or to AARP on their website. That way, hey, we've identified the victims. Here's the money that we did get back from that guy or from a fund. Here's your portion of it. And that's something we love to do at the Secret Service.
Great.
From a technology product perspective too, these days we are seeing for example, email services have report phishing buttons. So it would help to click on that because like Felton mentioned, they see it at a larger scale. And if a good number of people like click on that button, they'll see a campaign going on and it will stop for a lot of future victims too. So it helps to see where these report buttons are and kind of click on them. Gmail, Outlook, all of them provide a simple button that you can click on to report a phishing email. And that will help stop a lot of fraud.
Right.
It's good. It's a good one.
All great points. Like you don't know what you don't know. So, and by reporting, you potentially could recoup some dollars or whatever and help others.
Right.
And the main thing is to make sure you report it, because we can't investigate it or know about it if no one never reports it.
Right. Right. So, great. All right. So, Captain Decuir, what are the primary objectives and responsibilities of the Financial Crime Division within your organization?
Within my organization, we try to be somewhat proactive when we learn about different schemes to kind of push it out to the public. But most often cases, everything that we do is reactive, and we're learning about it after the fact. And once we get it, we try to identify those suspects, no matter where they are in the world. We do a lot of partnering with the Secret Service, so that gives us an extension of law enforcement to go after people who are targeting either be it the elderly or just whomever that is that they're targeting.
Great. All right. Dr. Vaudreuil, can you provide an overview of your research project and its objectives regarding how individuals ages 65 and older are being targeted by misleading ads?
Absolutely. So I focus on a lot of different kinds of scams. And one of the projects that I worked on, research projects, we focused on telephony scams. And what we've noticed is that advertisements are distributed via internet. This can be done by legitimate means, by purchasing ads from Google or Microsoft. And whenever you purchase an ad, you can actually pay the advertising company money to target a specific demographics. That's legal. And so what we've noticed is that scammers are specifically targeting people above 65 years old by telling these internet companies, hey, we want the ads to be seen by them. And the ads pop up, but unfortunately, these ads would be for phishing websites that are advertising a 1-800 telephone number. And the problem with 1-800 telephone numbers is people trust them. They think all 1-800 numbers are legitimate, and they end up calling them, and that leads to a scam on the phone channel. But we've sort of studied it, and we were surprised to notice that there was explicit targeting of older adults in that. So we're continuing to research on how these phone calls go, how people scam, where the scammers operate, and things like that. So this is one running a line of our research where we're focusing on scam.
And you find that age group tends to make the phone call versus click on the ad, or?
Yeah, I mean, so it is happening in two ways.
Sure.
I guess scammers realize that age group is vulnerable, and so they're targeting the ad specifically for that age group. They even build their websites with large text just to make people with vision acuity issues also accessible, so that they can call the phone number and do that. So yeah, and because this group is vulnerable, it's a feedback mechanism where they're explicitly targeting them. And so yeah, we've noticed a lot of that. In fact, one of the interesting findings was that in our research, we infiltrated the scammer groups, and we've started looking at what their communications are. And so what they do is, once they realize that a group of people are victims, they sell their contact information for money, saying, hey, these people were victims before. Because with scams, the problem is if you find a person who fell for a scam, they would likely fall for another scam. So their information is sort of valuable, and they kind of sell it as a product in their markets. So that's
the scammers are using their own research, identifying it, making additional money by selling it to other people for additional scam purposes.
Exactly.
Right. They kind of piggyback off of other scams. So you'll see someone who falls victim to a scheme or a scam gets recognized, kind of that scheme or scam gets stopped, and next thing you know, they have that person's information, and they'll recontact that person for another scheme or another scam, and just to use them to kind of facilitate another scheme that they're part of. The bad part with this is that usually law enforcement or the financial institution or even the email company has contacted that victim and says, hey, you're part of a scam. You should, cease and desist what you're doing. Don't do this anymore. Don't send money. Don't receive money. Don't send emails. And then as part of that, they see a way of recouping their own loss. So they'll continue with the scam and with the scheme and target other individuals, which, that piggybacking, is becoming more and more of a problem that you described. It's just so many, like if you already have certain people engaged, why do I have to go out and seek new victims when they'll do it for me?
Right. And that demographic is so trusting. And they did not grow up with computers and many computers in their pockets, such as a cell phone. Right. And so, I know in talking with loved ones who are fall in that age range, they when the phone rang in the olden days, you answered it. There were no answering machines and it was exciting.
Right.
So, all right. So Felton, what role does the Secret Service play in combating cyber fraud, specifically as it pertains to protecting seniors?
So the Secret Service mission is not only to protect the president and the vice president and their family members, but we're also charged with by Congress to protect our financial infrastructure. That's our banking infrastructure. We take that very seriously. And the way we go about doing that is investigating different schemes, either counterfeit, anything that does with checks, treasury checks, things of that nature, anything that kind of touches the financial institutions here in the United States and abroad. One way we do that is through our partners, either federal, state, or local law enforcement, or with academia or with private entities like AARP. A lot of that we're doing now is just education, letting the population know what's going on. There's only so many Secret Service agents. There's only so many law enforcement. There's only so many people in academia. There's only so many entities. But if we all partner together to kind of get the mission and like what we're seeing out to more people, hopefully that word and that seed gets shown and shared with other people and how to do that. We do a lot of presentations to elder demographics, and we do a lot of investigations. We see just a lot of it now in this time frame that we've kind of talked about, who's being targeted. We go and meet with these people and talk to them. We bring them in, and we try to just meet them where they are to get that information and share it.
So, Bobby, what are some common red flags indicating potential fraud, and how can organizations effectively address them?
Well, from our experience speaking with some of our members and people that come to our workshops, if you get an inquiry and it looks like it's too good to be true, it probably is. And again, be skeptical. Make the call to a number that you know to be accurate. Some other red flags. I'd have to say that's probably the biggest one for us, and the folks that we speak to.
Offers that are too good to be true. And what about in the reverse of that? Something that might be jarring or shocking, like, kind of like a fake, you've already been a victim of a fraud.
Well, and there are several versions, some of the old stuff that we've seen years ago reappearing or some kind of a version of it. And I mean, other than just being skeptical, I think that's probably the biggest thing. And we got to remember, these people are criminals. They call you out of the blue. You get a call out of the blue from someone that you're not expecting, or maybe like your bank or the Veterans Administration or the IRS. They generally will not call you unless you have already started some kind of a communication or dialogue. And so you get these calls. It's not a call you should be getting. You don't have to be nice to these people. You didn't call them; they calling you. So I know we have good hearts. The people from my generation, we want to do good things. We want to do the right thing. But when somebody's calling you and they're trying to scam you or beat you out of your hard-earned money, you don't have to be nice to them. Just hang up on them.
That's good advice. And, and again, to your point, it goes against that generation's natural demeanor.
Yeah.
But, kind of the trust but verify, like, okay, if you're going to be trusting, please verify this before you act on anything. Great.
Kind of piggybacking off of what he just said with the old schemes. One of the older ones I've seen is coming back around is the Publishers Clearinghouse scheme, where they're telling you one X amount of dollars, but you need to pay the taxes on the money. If you win some money, promise you, they would just take the taxes out of whatever winnings. You should never have to pay money to get money.
Right. No, right. And, just looking at some of those items that are jarring, that we hear about, and maybe we'll discuss some of the telephonic, conversations. If your grandchild has been kidnapped, or if the police are coming to arrest you, I've never heard of any agency accepting gift cards as payment, and I've never been where if a grandchild was truly kidnapped that you cannot contact law enforcement to deal with that. So one thing we see with a lot of these that it is unexpected. You get this call, hey, a lot of it is just persistence on the criminal to the victim. No, you got to act now. You have to act now. You have to act now. We all know, we've all grown up in this environment. There's not too many things that are really a rush. There's accidents, people get injured, but that's usually in front of us. Anything over the phone or email, it can usually wait, or take your time, deal with it, and think about what you're doing.
And we never, ever take gift cards for payments. And we won't ever tell you someone's going to come pick up the cash from you.
Right.
You'll either have to go to a government agency, go inside, and not meet someone in the parking lot of that place. So always keep those things in mind.
That's a clue. When you got to make that immediate decision, that's almost always a scam, because like he said, that you should have time to be able to think about it, to do your research, to make whatever decision is appropriate for you.
And their research could be reaching out to one of your organizations.
Correct.
To say, there's no shame in that. To say, I just received this call or this whatever, and, can you help me? Because again, this generation logging on to the computer to verify things and so forth, that might not be their first go-to. They want to talk to a human.
Right.
And help them.
As they should, probably.
Right.
That's usually your best bet.
And one other key thing, when they try to keep you on the telephone, tell them, oh no, don't hang up. That should be a immediate red flag for anyone when they're telling you can't hang up, you can't do this, or you can't. They're trying to keep you from verifying it. So, and trying to keep you on the edge just to make you think, okay, you have to do this right now. When you're dealing with any type of law enforcement agency, you will always have time to do what's always going to be in your best interest, because sometimes, just grabbing money out your bank account may not be what you need to do at that point. You may need to make some other type of arrangements, and you will always have time to do that.
As a follow-up, I guess, we're seeing two trends here. So what's too good to be true, and the other alternative, too bad to be true.
Right.
And so maybe IRS saying that you're delinquent and making phone calls, and then your son getting kidnapped, right? We saw two. What we saw in the digital world, what else is that? A pop-up saying that your system is infected with a Windows C blue screen coming up and saying, call this phone number. Don't call it. Just turn off your system and turn it back on. Because probably that's a lie as well. Again, it's too bad to be true. You get an email saying you subscribed to a service you've never heard of for $800. Too bad to be true. Maybe just delete the email. Right? So these are certain cases or verify with your alternative source. Like the moment you get a bad news or a good news, verify with an alternative source. If you say someone, you subscribe to $800 service, check your credit card bill. Maybe you did not. if someone says your your system is infected, turn it off and turn it on. Just verify from an alternative source, just to confirm that, I guess. And just to piggyback on that, either too good or too bad, the idea is to psychologically put you in an emotional state where you don't think well and you do not make logical decisions when you are under emotional distress, good or bad, like taking to the extreme. So I guess it's good to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
No, I mean that is right on the hitting the nail on with the hammer. Just find a source that you trust, and we try to direct people. Hey, contact your loved one. You don't want to listen to Special Agent Joseph? That's perfectly fine. I get it. Contact someone you trust. There's someone at the bank you've dealt with face to face that you know. There's a loved one, a son or a daughter, or a spouse. Contact, ask them about it, and even then, if you don't trust these people, ask someone outside that circle. Maybe at your church or your aging community or somewhere that you go. You deal with, hey, I got this. This doesn't make sense. Hey, no, that may be a scam. Let's talk to someone else about this. But verifying the information with the scammer is never going to work.
Right.
The first time, this is years ago, that I got a communication from the IRS. You get a communication from the IRS you're not expecting. Yeah, it could be true, right?
Right.
So that was a learning experience for me because fortunately it wasn't true, but it could have been.
Right. And to your point earlier, it is okay to just hang up
Oh, yeah.
and not engage.
These are criminals, they belong in jail, not out trying to solicit and scam older adults, veterans, even, young folks today. So
Right. I mean, this is, it affects everybody.
pervasive.
Absolutely. So,
I'm sorry, just to add, my first year in the US, I got a phone call from IRS. I guess welcome call.
I don't think they do that, but maybe.
And they said, but they were going to arrest me in like an hour. And I was scared for a bit, for sure. Yeah, that's what happened. It's good to discuss what kind of scams happen because I think, like Felton mentioned, they happen en masse. They happen. And so, like Richard said, don't be embarrassed. Talk about it because probably somebody else is facing it. And you could see the patterns in there and because there are only so many stories that these people can come up with. There are successful stories and they keep reusing. Just between us, we see 2 of us got IRS calls. Yeah, there is a pattern and it's good to discuss what you see. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We learn from each other, and the more we learn, the more we can help others. And some of the things that we hear in our workshops, I mean, it's heartbreaking. People that can't afford to lose a few dollars, maybe less than $500, and it's the difference between maybe they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their meds, and they lost it to this criminal.
Right. Dr. Vidrevu, tell us more about how you assess the impact of the misleading ads on the elderly population's beliefs, their behaviors, kind of like diving into what we've been talking to in their financial decisions.
You mean like of the ads or the impact? Like
Just in your research, like what are you finding? Like how is this, how is it truly impacting and changing their behavior?
Yeah. So again, going back of what our findings are from the infiltrated communications, we saw between scammers and what they say is, well, they not only they sell phone calls. Like for example, once they hook victims on, the scammers sell a live phone call to other scammers. Because their job is only to hook people on. Like they make nice websites and to lure people in to call them, a 1-800 number. But once they get a phone call, how do they monetize this call, make money out of the victim? They sell this to another scammer who's experts in scamming people, right? Convincing them to pay money. Now, what we've noticed is that the success rate, at least that they are claiming for these phone calls, is about 20%. So what they say is 20% of the phone calls might end up becoming successful in victimizing people. This is way, way different from phishing emails where you have to send like 10,000 emails before you can click on one. So what it means is that this is a much more lucrative thing for the scammers if they can get hold of a live victim in the target demographic there's a very high chance that you might convince them to get.
And, in a little bit of research I was doing before I met with y'all today, I saw where there's so much emphasis on the scammers building rapport when they're on the phone with potential victims. They're very, very, it's not like I am reading a script, they're very good. They are, engaging with, you remind me of my grandmother or blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's like they psychologists, and they're trying to develop that profile of the target, so to speak, so that they can get to the point where they'll steal something from them. And I mean, they're professionals, and unfortunately we not, so that's why we just got to be skeptical. Well, let's talk a minute about the number of personal information that's stolen, and probably amongst us, our identities have been stolen multiple times. And so there are a lot of things that these criminals do with that information. They might sell it right away, or they might keep it for years. That information might not come back, your personal information, maybe years down the line before it's actually sold and used. And, you buy one of these services that tracks your credit and protects your identity, and you do it for a year or two. Well, maybe that's not really done any good for you, because years from now that information will be back in the dark web or in the dark market.
No, I think we do see a lot of that where the criminals do. All they have is time. We think 20% of the calls are successful. Well, 20% of if you make 100 calls one day, maybe you get 500 here, 2,000 here, you may get $50,000 from someone. We've seen that. Just working with, Captain Decuir, we've gotten those calls. Hey, this person went to their bank, withdrew $50,000, put it in a Bitcoin ATM, or left it out in their trunk of their car for someone to come and get. So that's one person out of maybe 100, 200 calls that were made that day that they were successful with. You do that every day, 365 days a year.
Well, and the fact that I learned today that they're selling the information of the people who accept the bait, if you will, to other scammers. So they're just, they can literally build, a whole persona of this person.
Just probably within the last couple of weeks, we had 2 victims who were called with people impersonate the sheriff's office saying that they had warrants for their arrest. And these are people that didn't even have criminal histories.
Right.
And between just those 2 victims, I want to say they probably got a little bit over $35,000, $40,000 out of them. Just 2 people.
And and that's why we, once again, report it, tell somebody, because guess what? Now I'm going to impersonate you. I'm going to go set up a bank account. I'm going to use your information. You've got to tell someone, tell your credit, union, tell your credit, report to your credit, TransUnion or Equifax, report it to them, report it to law enforcement, because next thing you know, someone's going to use your information to perpetuate the scheme even further.
Correct.
Following up on Richard's comment about impersonating phone calls, I just want to mention one thing. Like for phishing web pages and emails, you could look at the source address, maybe the web page name. But for phone calls, it's important to understand that phone number spoofing is a thing.
Yeah.
So somebody could call from the sheriff's department with exactly the same phone number, but that need not be the true thing. The only way to verify is to call back the sheriff's office. If you see sheriff's phone number show up in your caller ID, that need not be real. The unfortunate thing is that telephony technologies precede the current internet technologies, so there's no security built into it as it was developed. So unfortunately, what that means is that anybody can spoof anybody's number, impersonate someone else's number, and make a phone call to you. So it's always best to verify by calling back. Don't trust the phone number that shows up on caller ID.
Right.
I think
Speaking on that spoofing thing, when we backtrack to try to identify the person who originally made the phone call through the spoofing, and when you go through that spoofing website, to try to keep themselves from getting in trouble, they say this is for entertainment purposes only. So they're trying to protect themselves from any type of prosecution, even though they're part of the scam.
Right.
That's furthering the scams. That
Like
people do.
you were at a slumber party as a child and you would prank call people like your refrigerator is running. Right.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. So that, okay. Well, Captain Decuir, why don't you talk to us a little bit? How does your division investigate and prosecute cases involving financial exploitation of seniors, and what challenges do you typically encounter in these investigations?
The biggest challenge we have is from people not reporting. We have a lot of seniors that we deal with them, and sometimes no matter what we try to tell them, says, hey, you're being part of the victim of a scam. And because these scammers have built such a rapport with these people, they don't believe it, and they believe the things that they're telling us. We work closely with the DA's office here, and trying to further prevent is a lot of the scams that we deal with. A lot of times we try to target those people, the suspects, real hard, because we're not going to ever stop it. But the biggest thing we try to do is we try to target and do so much enforcement toward those scammers that we at least push them out of our area.
Right.
It's kind of sad to say it that way, but if we can protect our area, it's going to be up to that next law enforcement agent to continue doing what we are doing. But that's been the biggest issue we've been dealing with lately.
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
We do not.
What I enjoy about our aspect, as part of being the coordinator for Louisiana Cyber Fraud Task Force, we have East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office. So like that information gets fed to us. We coordinate together, which then I can share that information quickly with other parishes, with other police departments. Hey, this is what's going on right now. Look for this. I can share it with academia, with those partnerships. And, what we see is, when we go to the district attorney's office or the U.S. attorney's office, hey, we've established this through our partners. Here are the cases. The one-offs, it's hard to sometimes get prosecuted because we know it's going to be a long road to track down who the scammer is. But if I have 10 or 100, it's kind of one of those things like we know we have a true problem, and some of the scammers, unfortunately, I'll tell you, been children. I've seen kids do it. All right. I've seen, the organized groups that are, overseas do it. And, and like I told you earlier, sometimes the victims then become part of the scam themselves, which we've had to go arrest and prosecute, which, on a personal matter, like, you're like this, you're someone's grandmother, and now I have to arrest you, take you in because, some department has already told you, hey, you're part of a scam. You need to knock it off. The bank has probably told you. You've gotten some other information. Hey, you're part of the scam. Stop. Now I'm here at your door with a warrant in hand because you continued the scam. So we see a lot of this. I think just partnering, like sharing the information, is just a big aspect.
And that's great to, because you're the parish level, you would be state again. And so no matter where the information is coming from, the fact that y'all are communicating, so, you get one and then you can look and identify like, hey, this is the same thing.
Right.
So, that's as a member of the state, I'm excited to hear that.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So, Bobby, why don't you tell us how has technology evolved in detecting and preventing fraud? And what are the latest advancements in this?
Okay. Say that again.
Sorry. Absolutely. We all, coffee's a good thing too. How has technology evolved in detecting and preventing fraud? And what are the latest advancements in this field? And this can really be open to the floor.
How has technology evolved? I guess from our perspective of older adults, one thing that we do see, I don't think that older adults are necessarily technical savvy like some of our younger folks might be. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because with technology, at least they can monitor their checking accounts. They can monitor their bills. They can see, they get a call and they say, "Oh, you owe us some money," or "This check didn't go through." They can go to their accounts and they can do it immediately. So that's been one thing that's been helpful. However, I don't think that. I don't have necessarily the numbers to support it, maybe just anecdotally, but there are a lot of people who still feel uncomfortable using the technology that way. And so they still depend on a phone call to their banking institutions, as an example. So that would be one thing that I say that it has been helpful, or it could be more helpful.
Right. And then also just the technology, like you were speaking of, the spoofing of phone numbers. I imagine just the exponential increase in the number of people who are victims of fraud.
Yeah, and
over the last, 10 years.
I had, when you were talking about spoofing just a minute ago, I had a call on my cell phone. The caller ID showed it was my number calling me.
Right.
So we got. Spoofing is a big deal, and people, especially older adults, take it for granted that this is a legitimate call from a legitimate entity, and it might not be. And so we try to get that message out to people. If it's a number you don't recognize, you don't have to answer. There's also a thing that you can, if you put your family numbers and your doctor's numbers and pharmacy numbers, important numbers in your cell phone, you can go to the settings and set silence unrecognized calls, and that call will not ring. It'll automatically go to voicemail. And so then you can decide whether or not you want to return that call. So that's a technological advance that is also helpful, but probably one that's little known.
No, that's great. Because again, as I spoke about earlier, like that generation, the phone rings, you answer it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that way, I don't know how many of the scammers leave messages.
They, some are apt to do it. Once again, phishing.
Right.
Whatever I get on the hook, I get on the hook.
Be surprised.
Really? Okay. Because that's always if I don't recognize the number, if you leave me a message, then maybe I'm calling you back.
And if they don't leave a message, well, it must have not been important, even if it was somebody you know.
Exactly. Right. Same thing. If I see an email that I think might be phishing, even if it's from like someone that I should have a relationship with, if you will, I won't open it. And I'm like, if it's really important, they will email me again. So
absolutely,
it's unbelievable the number of people, and I'm not judging and I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that people get a call, and they don't recognize the number. They answer the phone, and then they have this big conversation with a crook.
No.
So,
one thing, I try not, when we do presentations and outreach, I say, I'm not trying to be ageist, but you function your whole life without digital currency, without certain aspects of the system, financial system that are new, like technically savvy. And if you're not comfortable with those things, you don't have to use them. You can still go. We still accept cash all over the country and all over the world. If you want to go write a check and deliver it somewhere, you can do that. You don't have to actually put it in the mail sometimes, but that's an option. So there's still things that you've all used and worked with that have worked. If you're comfortable with that, use that. If there's an issue with that, where the problem now originates. Once you start branching off to other things, you're kind of opening yourself up to it. And that's fine if you want to do that, but understand the risk that you may take because you don't know. And yeah, we're not, against people learning. I'm all about, teaching and sharing. But if you've never used Bitcoin and you don't have a need for Bitcoin, I always ask, I was like, what would you do with it? You didn't know about it. And they're like, oh, I wouldn't use it. You're like, all right, continue that way sometimes.
Yeah, I'm a computer science technologist, but I completely second what you said. If you're not comfortable, continue be doing what you're comfortable with, because with technological advancements comes what we call as a threat surface area that increases.
Right.
Because if technology increases, the kind of like attackable stuff increases, right?
Right.
You mentioned cryptocurrencies. Like we've had a recent project focusing only on cryptocurrency scams happening on Twitter. And there are a ton of them because they're like bots. And with cryptocurrencies, the issue is that there's no central authority to call. You could call your bank if you have a problem with your Chase bank account. You can't do that with cryptocurrency. Bitcoin doesn't operate a call center to call. And the issue there is that people just trust scammers and they end up losing. So there's a lot of scams happening with this new technology. Well, technology is there for the good too. There are good things happening. Right now, some mobile carriers identify suspicious phone calls and sort of like give a message. So that is good. But again, with technology comes the bad stuff too. When talking about spoofing, what I see very often is that when I receive a phone call, I have a Georgia phone number. I have like a 678 phone number. And I get what scammers do is a lot of times they impersonate your area code because there's more likelihood that you will answer the phone because you think it's local, right? So even though I moved to Louisiana, I keep getting all numbers, calls from 678. I immediately know it's a scam.
Right.
Even if my carrier doesn't know. But it's not so if you are coming and working in a local area phone number.
Right.
But just saying that as technology advances, like this both happening. And,
absolutely.
Right. So, Felton, one last question for you specifically. How does the Secret Service prioritize resources and allocate manpower to combat fraud while also addressing other types of financial crimes?
That's usually a challenge for us, especially being one of the federal agencies that has a dual mission. You know, we still have our protection mission that we have to go out and do. But with that, the way we prioritize some of these things is we look at some of that information that's been shared with us, or if it has not been shared with us. If there's a new scam that's going out and it's affecting our geographic district area, we kind of then put that kind of at the top and say, hey, this is new. Some of the older stuff is not that we're neglecting it, but we know it's already happening. We've already addressed it. The new stuff, we're trying to get ahead. Instead of being as reactive sometimes that we are, we're trying to be proactive. So we hear about a new scam or something that's going on in a different part of the United States or the world, we try to get ahead of that and let people know, share it with our partners on our task force. One of the best things that we do, I think, is just outreach and just sharing the word with people, like how this is affecting you, affecting this demographic, affecting this region, what is being used and how you can combat it. Once again, there's only a limited number of Secret Service agents, even here just in the state of Louisiana. Then our task force members, our partners, they have other things that they have to deal with, some of the, violent crime and things of that nature. But when we partner together and we can see these things, we say, okay, the criminal has evolved. They're not doing this anymore, or they're doing this. This is how we're going to have to combat this. This is the information we're going to have to get out and let everybody know this is what the scheme is and what the scam is. And then sometimes a lot of it's just calling our partners. Hey, do you know Sheriff Department X that your department is being used as part of a scheme here in the state? Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. The IRS, they've known for a while. CBP, Customs, they've heard it for a while. But very rarely, I've never really heard of like someone impersonating a Secret Service agent. But recently, we have a case that we're investigating where someone's impersonating a Social Security agent. That's unheard of, not common. So that's a new form, a new scheme that they've now evolved to. If you get used to something, Customs, I know they're not going to call me. FBI's not going to call me. The Sheriff Department's not going to call me. But I do get Social Security, especially for, the demographic, the age, they get Social Security. They get Medicaid. So now they're getting this call. It's very important.
All right. So one last question from an AARP member. Discuss the growing role of artificial intelligence in detecting and combating fraud. and how organizations are adapting to this shift in technology to stay ahead of emerging fraud schemes.
Yeah, that's a big one. Who knows where artificial intelligence is going? It's certainly a big concern because, you hear a lot of how helpful artificial intelligence can be, but at the same time, it can also be used for other purposes that are not so helpful. And, again, it's about education. We try to educate our members. If there's a new scheme out there that, pops up on the radar, or as we hear it from our members and others, the public who calls our Fraud Watch helpline, this is new information. This is something that we have to share with our members and the general public. And, our request to us for those fraud protection workshops, how to protect yourself from identity theft and fraud, those requests are growing, and we're having more and more people educated. And what we're seeing is that, some of the same people are coming back for another workshop. They'll hear something, and then if they hear it often enough, it might sink in. So, artificial intelligence is going to be something that not only AARP has to be aware of, but, industries across the board, our law enforcement agencies, and, who knows where it's going to go? Who knows what kind of legislation is being proposed in the states around the country, and what needs to be proposed. So, it's just an area of concern.
Right. Any other closing thoughts?
We just always encourage people to take a moment, think about what you're being asked to do. And if you are a victim, or even if you're not a victim, you don't fall scheme to it, report it anyway. Report it to someone. Tell somebody.
Same thing. I think the scammers are essentially trying to get you into an emotionally vulnerable state. You don't need to comply, although the situation looks like you need to comply. There's very, very rare occasions where you ever need to do that, like stick on a phone call, don't turn off your computer. Like, nothing really in the real world happens like that. So when you see that you're being forced into something, don't kind of do that. And then, follow up on alternative sources.
The age-old saying, if it's too good to be true, it's probably not true. And I like the way you use that. If it's too bad to be true, it's probably not true as well.
Right.
So I think the more we can be aware of scams and fraud, the more we're able to protect ourselves. And we want to protect all of our personal information, our personal identification numbers, our ID numbers, our social security numbers, do our research, be vigilant, be skeptical, keep an eye on your credit reports, monitor your bills and, your charge accounts. And I realize that's a lot of things to do, but, if the more you can do, the better you'll be able to protect yourself and your identity.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining us today and for all of the great information that you have shared. I'd also like to thank AARP Louisiana for this educational discussion about fraud. And most importantly, thank you for joining us today.